Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 132 of Into the Outer Realms. I'm your interstellar host, Joey Medea, bringing you into the outer realms where the paranormal and the supernatural become the normal and the natural. Tonight's show is about archetypes. It's a teaching opportunity. I hope we have some writers in the audience. If we have some audience members who know writers, young writers, writers with experience who maybe haven't thought about character in terms of archetype, story in terms of archetype. Hopefully this will be a useful show for everyone. It's a multi-level kind of thing. I've been studying archetypes probably for 30 years. I probably was introduced to them in college, so even longer than that. So I'm going to go ahead and just roll the intro and get right to it. I'm going to keep the show to an hour tonight. So let's start. Welcome everyone who's here.
There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon. The preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms.
Okay, so I see all the core outer realmers gathering in the chat room. Awesome, Michael. Especially glad you're here because this is a lead into next week. We're going to have Michael and CL come in, our power duo of contributors. Michael and I were talking the other night. He was over the house. We were doing a campfire, calling in a UFO. We'll have to talk about that sometime. But it seemed like that's what it was. Saw some gnomes with torches dancing around a portal. It was a lively night. That was a couple weeks ago here at the Creative Cottage. But anyway, Michael, we're going to be doing, I think it's going to be 6 times was the whole point. I got a little off track because of our experiments. It'll be his 6th time on the show. I believe the 4th with CL. We're going to talk about the shadow. So I'm going to touch on the shadow tonight. I admire Carl Jung. I'm going to talk about Carl Jung tonight. He was an interestingly flawed individual. Oftentimes, the way he treated women, he had a wife, plus he had a mistress, Toni Wolff, who did a lot of the work that was attributed to him. So there was a book by Nan Savage. Nan passed a few years ago from cancer, and I had the honor of helping to develop and doing the editing for that book. But I think one of the things he got wrong was about the shadow. I'm going to tease a little my own experience tonight. Tonight's going to be very personal. I don't think that you can talk about the archetypes in any kind of useful way without being personal. So I'm going to share with you my archetypes after sharing with you some background. You know me, the teacher, one of my archetypes that I'm going to talk about tonight. But hello, Jessica. Jessica has her card. So this is a good time to point this out. This is what I'm going to be using tonight, the Carolyn Myss archetype cards. These are terrific. You're going to see a bunch of them tonight. The show's kind of built into segments. So the first act will be some background from Myss, from Carl Jung, some other ideas. Then we're going to get into some applications. Carolyn Myss believes that we all have 4 core archetypes. So I'm going to talk about those. Then I'm going to talk about my 8 archetypes, and that fill out what she calls the 12, which is interesting. 12 apostles. In some of my books, I have a council of 12. Council of 12 comes up throughout antiquity and through the Middle Ages. 12 is a very prevalent number when you get a group of people together. In one of the books I'm going to talk about tonight, he has a council of 12 advisors. So this idea of the 12 archetypes being kind of advisors, characters or forms that you can have a conversation with, I think is very exciting. Chassie, hello. I think it's been a while. Welcome back to the show. Lori, hello. Lori will be on early November doing some readings, an audience appreciation night with Tanya. It'll be her return after months and months. That'll be exciting. There's CL. Who will be on camera with us next week talking about the shadow. There's Miss Tanya. Michael says, yes, it was a fun night visiting you and Tanya as always, and so excited for next week. So that's great. Lori also says that she has these cards. I recommend them. I am not on Carolyn Myss's payroll. But these work. They're wonderful. Tanya and I have probably been using these for a decade, and it's been wonderful. And how they change is terrific. There's Ronald Tolvar, so it's a good time to say, remember, you can always catch the show Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. EST, what we call Into the Outer Realms Revisited. It's audio only, and it's just 3 weeks behind of where they are. So CL says, in some version of the Arthurian legends, there are 12 Knights of the Round Table as well. Yes, I am reading Detroit's Percival right now. I wrote a play, 2 decades ago that won an award and had a reading in Nevada, Tales from a Deep Dream River. And that's based on the Grail legends. And so that's absolutely right. I think it's very, very powerful. So let's get into this. Let's get into the background, and then let's get into the practical. I'm excited. There's no guest tonight, so I can be really, really active with you all. CL says, I've been obsessed with the Arthurian Mysteries Junior High. Me too. I've read just about every version of them. Just finished Bernard Cornwell's trilogy, which deals with Arthur, the heretic, and so forth. Those are very, very interesting books. No, that was the second one. The Arthurian is the first trilogy that I read, but he's a brilliant writer. So Carolyn Myss, in the book that comes along with these cards, she really starts with Plato. So you're talking probably 380, 370 BC when he was getting into this. And he was talking about ideal templates that he called forms. So that's just another name really for archetypes. I'm going to go back and say that it goes all the way really back to the Paleolithic cave drawings, which is a lexicon, is a visual alphabet, a visual code of our early history. Maybe, ancient astronaut theorists even say compelling stories of visitors from other dimensions, from monsters, from beings, from ETs, interdimensional travelers, spaceships, all of those kinds of things. But I also think embedded are certainly maybe non-character archetypes, mountains, earth, fire, the elements, all of those kinds of things. But I think as old as storytelling is archetypes. And that's why I've chosen to link the two tonight. I think that's incredibly important. Good evening to you, Charles. It's always good to see you. Charles will check me if I'm talking too fast and I get a fact wrong. And I really appreciate, of course, that he does that. So after Plato, I think we jump really to Carl Jung, who did so much work on the archetypes. When I was first introduced to the archetypes, it was through the work of Carl Jung. So this idea of psychological patterns derived from historical roles. Okay, that's really good. So what is the psychology of these different archetypes? That is a big value to them. That's probably the main value. So good. Universal events or situations constellate around archetypes. And some of those are initiations, death, rebirth, which are, of course, initiations of different kinds, especially if you believe in the everlasting nature of consciousness surviving this body, this meat suit that we wear. So let's get into Carl Jung, and this is going to be a bit of a caveat on some of these things. CL and Michael, I think, will agree, and we're going to talk about it next week when we talk about the shadow, because this is where I really diverge from Jung. But here's a quote from Jung: Archetypes, a primordial image or archetype is a figure, be it a daemon, and that's an important thing. Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, Tanya and I have talked about that as inspirational. This idea of a daemon, the idea of a genius, was this spirit akin to a muse, the source that comes down and helps you with intuition and creativity and imagination. And certainly the archetypes are highly, highly into this. So be it a daemon, a human being, or a process. I like the idea of archetype as process because they're a process. What my primary 8 after the 4 core archetypes are change over time. So I'm excited to kind of share that with you tonight. And they constantly recur in the course of history. So, of course, to become an archetype, right, it's got to happen over and over, kind of survive. It's not an archetype is not a flavor of the week. It's not a trend, but it endures over time. The great writer Shakespeare trafficked in archetypes, easily recognizable. And I'll say I should have pulled the book, but Bruno Bettelheim's The Uses of Enchantment, as Joe Campbell would say, it's all over the place. It's all over the place. The idea of these archetypes in fairy tales. Why? Because fairy tales are instructive. So if the prince has blonde hair and he's 6'2" and he's got icy blue eyes, and then people who look like me, we don't identify with the prince. So the door into the story, the door into the template, into the archetype of being the prince, say for instance, is locked away for us. So if you notice in the original forms of the fairy tales, the characters are very general. That's counterintuitive to what we do as modern day novelists, where it's very, very, or Charles Dickens spending 2 pages on the brocade pattern of someone's vest, a bit of as an exaggeration, but not really. Highly, highly detailed. But fairy tales operate in that dream realm, that dreamscape where these archetypes rise up for us and resonate and speak to us. So it's interesting. So let me put this whole thing together for you. Jung says primordial image or archetype is a figure, be it a daemon, a human being, or a process that constantly recurs in the course of history and appears wherever creative fantasy is freely expressed. So these are keys to creative expression. You don't have to be a formal writing books, plays, screenplays to be a storyteller. We all need to tell our stories. If the fates and the muses be kind, my book, sort of a life's work that I've been working on for about 12, 15 years, Every Day is a Story All Its Own, is going to come out next year. And that is all about the importance of telling our stories. That's my YouTube channel, Every Day is a Story All Its Own. 7 days, 7 chances to tell a new story. Essentially, these are mythological figures. But we speak the mythological figures into existence. That's the point. That's our common language. It's a mathematics of a different kind, Myss, and I've talked about them a lot. So Jung says that the human psyche, body, mind, and soul, is made up of 3 parts: the ego, the conscious mind, the personal unconscious, including our suppressed memories, right? You're talking about analytical psychology here, and the collective unconscious, which is our ancestral memory, which is our tribal, right? Our more base chakras, however you want to pronounce it. The base chakras have to do with ancestral tribal memory coming through and being in us. This is counter to the idea of the tabula rasa, right? The clean slate that we all come in and then everything's imprinted upon us. But look, let's look at this across cultures and across ideas. Don Miguel Ruiz, the 4 Agreements. We have these things imprinted upon us from an early age, plus we bring them in. So So if you want to study all this stuff, look at the idea of the tabula rasa or the clean slate or not. But we bring stuff. The sinister, the shadow side of what we do with this stuff is Scientology, the cleaning of the engrams and all of that stuff used as a means of control as you ascend up. But we do bring some ancestral, but our ancestors also come to us. I was talking to Sandy Hart and some other recent guests about that, and they come to help us to kind of balance that, whatever's in our DNA, our big ancestral, the capital A. So there are 4 Jungian archetypes, and this is where it gets a little, but bear with, because it's important to the lesson of archetypes. They reflect human ambition, values, morals, beliefs, and motivations. Well, hey, as an actor, director, and a writer, that is story, ambition, values, morals, beliefs, and motivations. Why we do what we do, and at the core, who we are. So Carl Jung identifies 4 main archetypes. Okay? The persona, the different masks we wear in a social context. Absolutely. Actors and writers are absolutely aware of this. A kind of sort of New York, sort of Walter Matthau said, actors are phonies. I like them because they know they're phonies. That's, maybe that's the shadow side of the persona, putting one over on someone, being a con artist. Would be the sort of shadow of that. But it's the different masks we wear in the social context. Who we are with family is who we're different from work. I say, as a mentor, which is another one of my archetypes, that morphing yourself a little to whoever's on the other side of that table is a good thing. I will get their rhythms. I will get their language. Maybe if you go back and watch different episodes of this show with the different energies of the guests, you will see that I subtly adjust. You sort of almost mirror back to them what they are. It builds comfort. So if I have a very quiet guest, I'm not going to be as loud. If I have a very gregarious guest, next week Michael and CL always bring big energy, so I'm going to have a little bigger energy to honor that. Then there's the shadow. Okay, so this is where we diverge, Jung and I. He believed that humans have a light side and a dark side, and the dark side is what we choose to repress. Okay. Sometimes we don't want to deal with it. Oftentimes, and I think this is what's important and why I'm really excited about next week's conversation with Michael and CL, is that we don't want to deal with it. So, okay, yeah, maybe that's repressed. We look the other way, but we darn well know that it's there. What I found, and I'm going to save this to next week, is it's absolutely crucial to who we are. It can be our teeth. It can be our voice. It can be our protector. And next week, I will talk about my journey through the shadow, going through as an actor in college. It really was difficult. And for years, through most of my 20s, dealing with all this. So Michael says, yeah, we're loud. No, I didn't say, I meant energized and enthusiastic. So that's kind of where I'm with that. Yes, CL says big energy. There you go. So that's the shadow. Then is the anima or the animus. I'm not sure about this either, especially now where we're going as the human race. Culture, upbringing, experiences shape our perception of the world. The anima or woman and the animus or man is a reflection of the opposite gender, the ideal. So, of course, males have feminine traits. Females have masculine traits. I know some writers who have done some brilliant work on this, the anima and the animus. It still resides in Jungian psychology. It can be useful, but now we're moving away. It's getting more complex, but we're still aware of it. The anima represents femininity in a man's psyche, while the animus represents masculinity in a woman's psyche. So we may need to adjust these terms a little for where we're going. But the idea, and in the archetypes, the divine feminine. Again, there's writers I know, and unfortunately their names are escaping me right now. I've read and reviewed their books, but and then there's the self. So the ego merges with the conscious and unconscious states to give rise to the self. So when our conscious and our unconscious are in balance, and I think too, when our light and shadow aspects are in balance, they're in conversation, It's not enough to just bring them out and dispel them, try to destroy them. I made that mistake, and it made for misery through my late teens and my 20s. Again, we'll save that for next week. But the self is the whole representing Jungian individuation. Okay, so that's important, this idea of individuation, because what it gets to, and I want to bring in some other people, like I said in the advertising for this show, Brene Brown, authenticity. Without individuation, you can't have authenticity. And this is relationship with our archetypes. Who are they? What do they mean to us? What do they function? Something that's really stayed with me, speaking of CL, is I think in the last episode we talked about maiden, mother, crone. CL let us know that that's much more complex. It's even kind of iffy in some realms where it seemed to really be resonant. I work with it in Scenes from a Deep Dream River. The maiden, the mother, and the crone are a big part of the Grail lore in some way. But as I was talking to Sandy Hart a couple weeks ago, and I brought this up on purpose, you can be all three at once. You can be every archetype in this deck to some greater or lesser degree. Your dominant archetypes can change. That's the fluidity of growth. It's the difference between being and becoming, being in that constant state of growth. Because when you stop, when you're just being, then you're given to entropy. Then you're given to degradation, right there. So, and then another thing is, another piece of this. So Brene Brown's authenticity, archetypes are invaluable for that. The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. This was a life-changing book. Tanya and I talk about it all the time. He talks about your zone of genius. That's the rarefied air. More and more in my life, I get to live my zone of genius. That thing that is just quintessentially me, that I believe that I can bring here, why I'm here. This folds back on Myss's soul contracts. I don't like to think about soul contracts. Tanya's probably laughing now, possibly rolling her eyes. I don't discount soul contracts. I just don't choose to think about them, in my conscious daily mind. But anyway, Hendricks says that there's 4 levels. You have your zone of incompetence, things you stink at. I'm never going to tear down and rebuild an engine anytime soon. You open the hood of a car, I kind of know where things are, kind of know how they operate, but that's incompetence. There are other things that I can't dance. I got no rhythm and I can't dance. Don't ask me. Then you have your zone of confidence. That's the things that we kind of do every day. You're good enough at them to get them done. So many people are stuck in their zone of competence with their job. Which is kind of unfortunate. Then you have your zone of excellence. So these are things where you've put in your 10,000 hours. You're really good. This might be your job. You might not be passionate about it, but darn goodness, you are excellent at it. And your promotions and your raises and your opportunities reflect that. But then there's that zone of genius. That's where Einstein time exists. That's the tip off to when you're living in your zone of genius. It's what he calls Einstein time, and everyone from philosophers to metaphysicists to physicists have different names for this. The fluid nature of time, right? When we're bored out of our minds, a minute seems like an hour. When I'm working on my books, an hour seems like a minute. So that folds in to really know these. I'm going to come back to Gay Hendricks in just a little bit. So Myss's sacred contract. It could be, Lori says, a hobby. Really, your zone of competence could be a hobby. I have hobbies that I'm not great at, but I'm competent at them. But your zone of excellence could be hobbies. So we make agreements. According to Myss and many other people, and I think Tanya believes this very solidly, that we make agreements before birth about how our life lessons, Earth as this plane as the big classroom, and that's why we come here. We get into, rebirth and the wheel of samsara, reincarnation, getting it right, karma. I think a lot of those things are folded in here. She says that these 12 archetypes that everybody has, the 4 core ones that I'm about to share with you, and then your 8 specific ones, which again change over time if you're becoming instead of being, if you're moving, if you're fluid, then these 12 archetypes support that. it's a good thing to keep in mind. We need tools, we need advisors to get through the school, especially in these very tough times. I'm hoping tonight when you think about these archetypes, there's a few that maybe if you're feeling despair, if you're feeling fear, you can call upon these archetypes to get some strength, to do the act of daily living, or whether it's, regardless. We have to get up in the morning. We have to do the act of daily living. We have to keep our vibration high. We need to keep our candle lit. So whether this is a big cosmic contract or I can just focus on what's in front of me right now, I choose to do the second, if you see where I'm getting at really with that. So these are your intimate companions, these archetypes. Be in conversation with them. I find that to be a great help. The Inner Council of Advisors in Hawaiian shamanism. The number isn't specifically 12, but that's the first form of shamanism that I studied seriously, Hawaiian. Then I went to Siberian, and then I went to others from there. They also provide the foundation for your personality, for your drives, your feelings, your beliefs, your motivations and actions, which we already talked about from a different source. So it's good that there's some overlap. Myss and Young do go hand in glove in a lot of ways when it comes to the archetypes here. They are your guardians. That's why the shadow becomes important, right? A toothless tabby is no tabby at all. In Finding Joe, one of the principles in the Joseph Campbell Foundation says, if you're a tiger and you've been eating sheep food your whole life, you're a pretty poor specimen of a tiger. And Tanya will tell you that I usually shed a tear when he says that, because I've eaten a lot of sheep food in my life. I'm going to put that out there. But the archetypes, your guardians, your inner allies. So there you go. So let's talk about what are these 4 archetypes that all of us have. Well, the first one is the child. We all have that child. I directed and was in a play called The Fantastics. And when the romantic couple start to break up, when they start to see each other in the light, when the mystery of them being on opposite sides of the wall because their parents have this scheme to get them together goes away, and they really look at each other in the sunlight. At one point he goes, "You're childish." And she says, "Childlike." So childish, childlike could be the light and the shadow, darker aspect, because think of childish behavior, throwing a tantrum. But anyway, there's 6 of them. The first one is the orphan. I'm going to run through some of these because they don't speak to me that much. Family has always been my core. The natural child, I think we kind of all have that. We have lots of listeners and friends who are in West Virginia. It's hard not to have that aspect of the child if you're there in West Virginia with all that beauty, the mountains and the rivers, the forest, all of that kind of stuff. The divine child, I am not quite there yet, nowhere near that. And then the wounded child, and we all have that. Carolyn Myss, one of the things I love about her is she talks about people who lead with their wounds. So you go into a room, you meet them, "Hi, how you doing?" And within 5 minutes, they're telling you every defeat, everyone that screwed them over. I have a very close friend. I don't think he watches the show. I'm not going to name names, but he tends to lead with his wounds. He tends to lead with his defeats. And I will say to him, hey, nobody can get behind that. Nobody wants to hear about your defeats. Now, I will talk about my defeats using some of my archetypes because they're instructive. But one of those things that I love, okay, so here, this is interesting. Amy Jo says, "I am far from childish, but very childlike," in a funny way. Yes, and Amy Jo was just over the house last week. We're having a meeting about some exciting things, some ways that we can help out her foundation. Mark says, "I am more of a child like Eric Cartman." Okay, so what would that be? I think that would be a bit of the wounded child, but then Cartman comes at us with some great insights sometimes. So he's really moving back and forth between the wounded, I think, and the divine. Eric Cartman is sort of a voice for his generation, a social commentary, oftentimes the vocal point. He grows up in the future and becomes a rabbi. It's very interesting. The child sort of become the mystic, sort of become the religious philosopher. Amy Jo says, I think there's a big difference between childish and childlike. Absolutely. I think that the Fantastics really nail it. Are we being childlike in our wonder and our awe, all of those kinds of things? Because that leads, that idea of the childlike, and I'm getting behind here in the Ronald says, yeah, I write books. So storytellers is that very much. Let me see. Let's just get caught up here real quick. And I like to read these for, so there you go. Joey's saying there's still hope for me. There's hope for all of us. And it's really these fluid archetypes, because when you're in the realm of the child, you can move to the magical child. That is exciting stuff. The magical child goes hand in glove with the pure eternus, or the child eternal. That's Peter Pan. Now, if you use that to shirk your responsibilities, to not grow up, to not pull your weight. Oh, I'm the kid, I'm the free spirit, I'm the child. That can be often childish. But I reside, I think, the most strongly right now, I think, is the eternal child. And that's putting on costumes. That's doing Saturday morning story time, which in October I'll be doing it in costumes. So that's very much the eternal child. That's the youthfulness. That's the fun. I think it plays a little bit sometimes with the tricksterness. There can be a childlikeness in the trickster. Now, the trickster can be a very dark shadow, as you know, as well. So that's the child. That's the first of the four core. The next one, this is about leading with your wounds. This is, I think, about blaming others rather than taking responsibility. I don't identify very much, me personally, with the victim. I don't do the victim thing. And if I find myself doing the victim thing, I pull the brakes in a hurry. Now, the other two core ones, yeah, I do. But the victim is the one that I identify with the least. Remember, not everything's going to be equal. It depends on where in your life you are and all of that kind of stuff. The saboteur. Now, we all do this, the saboteur. And this is interesting. Gay Hendricks talks about this. Why do we do the saboteur? Why do we hide our light under a bushel? Why do we not go and seize that zone of genius? Make that big leap from our zone of excellence to our zone of genius. And that is the saboteur at work. So we have to be really careful about this one. Tanya's disagreeing with you here. Peter Pan is definitely the pure eternus. Thank you. The child is also very focused on self. The childish one is, but look, my grandpa, Charles Gimo, very strong Sicilian, would say, I love me, who do you love? That wasn't ego. That was common sense. If you don't love yourself, how can you love other people, and how can you accept love? So that focus on self is very, the focus on the ego. Again, if we go to Jung, the ego, this idea of the conscious mind, that is the wants, the needs, the motivations, all those kinds of things. We get landed bull crap. And that's why Don Miguel Ruiz, I think his work with the Four Agreements is so good. We're handed this nonsense about what we have to accomplish, who we have to be, what school we have to go to, what town we have to live in, how big our house is, what our car has to look like. I am so excited. I found a Ford Escape that I love. It's 13 years old. I didn't need to buy a 13-year-old car, but this car speaks to me. It is my archetype, the Ford Escape, the eternal child. I am out of here. I'm going to go escape. So the prostitute. Okay, this is where I'm going to tell you a very personal story. And I have never told this story publicly, and I'm going to move through it. But the prostitute is the one that has bitten me in the butt the hardest in my adult life. Even having gone through a divorce, going through other very hard times, defeats in business as an artist, when I prostituted myself. So very quickly, I'm going to try to go through this, but this is super, super instructive. The prostitute, because what saves me from being the prostitute is I'm losing my looks. No, being the archetypal prostitute is these other 8 archetypes right here. So I don't know, it's probably about 15 years ago. Tanya is in a leadership program. Every month she goes to the state capitol. I'm going to leave out a lot of details here for obvious reasons. She goes to the state. There's someone who lives in the same town with us. So they start to carpool. It's about an hour and a half. And of course, what do you do in the carpool? You share your archetypes, you share your dreams, you share your hopes. Here are 2 ambitious people who are trying to be leaders in health and human services, help kids. Tanya was with the Epilepsy Foundation at the time, so she gets this big scholarship to go to this leadership training. And so she says, oh, Joey's trying to do this, and he works with kids, and he's a storyteller, and we're trying to do this and that. Well, this woman has a boyfriend who's a con artist. He's a con artist. That is his archetype. He's the trickster. He's the shape shifter. Long story short, he starts to hear keywords because this woman is telling him about these conversations with Tanya. He's throwing bait in the water. She's the hook. She's the pole and the string. And I'm a little frustrated with my career. I'm in my early 30s. I'm trying to make things happen. I'm a networker. Some of the other archetypes that you're going to see. I'm a mentor. I want to help people. Long story short, he's coming up with this scheme. I'm going to leave out the details, but it's a foundation for a certain population of people. I'd fit in very nice. He starts to drop names. Julia Roberts, Val Kilmer. Oh, these are people I know. I'm working with the governor of this state. I'm working with a very prominent senator in this state. They were on opposite sides of the country. So he's working this scam. I don't know any of this. So he makes Tanya the secretary to their nonprofit foundation, which we help them set up because we have our own nonprofit foundation. So we know how to do it. So again, targeting, but always going back to ambition. If you want to get on the ground floor, if you want to meet these people, if you want to elevate your career, do this. Well, it caught me where I had a price. If you know Joe versus the Volcano, which I absolutely love, Patrick Shanahan, and it's Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. It's a wonderful fairy tale, Joe versus the Volcano. She says, I had my price. He knew it, and he bought me, and I'm shamed. And I was shamed. So we start to go in. So then the conversation gets to money. This guy is working 2 poles. Well, he needs operating capital. When he leaves X state and goes across the country to the other state, he's got to have his pockets loaded so he can buy gifts for people, so he can buy dinner, so he can look like he's a big deal. So I give him $15,000. Well, Tanya and I do, which we borrow from a relative who tries to talk us out of it. But no, we're committed. Then he's got this idea to do this beautiful ranch to help this segment of the population. It's going to have a theater and all this stuff. He makes Tanya the secretary position, right? You have a president, a vice president, a secretary, and a treasurer in a foundation. But after we set up, she's secretary to the foundation. Okay, totally ignorant. She's not the secretary taking notes or whatever. She's the secretary in this leadership group in your typical nonprofit. Okay, he has me calling and threatening people, and I'm doing it. I'm getting on the phone with my Sicilianness, and I'm threatening people, good people, people who he gave money to because he wanted something in exchange. So suddenly I'm like the Sicilian mafia calling and threatening people. It gets nuts. So he's got the $15,000. He's got this idea for this ranch. My dad is a model maker. Okay, and I introduce him to my father. I bring this Scafosa into my dad's house, this Fachim here, and he's got my father making the scale model because, you know, Julia Roberts is going to see it, and Val Kilmer's going to see it, and this is going on after months. We're in. All this stuff is going on. He and I meet. He's on his way to the next morning on a plane to meet with the governor of X state to move this along. They got to buy some land. He needs $2,500. So Joey, you're in this thing, in for a pound, in for a penny, in for a pound. Can you give me the $2,500? So I remember he drops me off at our apartment. I walk in the door. Tanya's sitting on the couch. I don't say hello. I say, listen, so and so needs $2,500. I don't want to talk about it. I'm taking it out of our bank account and I'm giving it to him. Tanya will tell you that I don't talk to her like that. And when it comes to money, we do everything equally and we talk about it. So the prostitute is in full. It is my dominant archetype by this point. Now, luckily, Tanya and I pulled the brakes on it. We got out of this thing. We lost $17,500. But we got the FBI on his case. He got banished to some island, never sees his grandchildren anymore, basically can't come back to the United States. We were able to write off the 17.5 as a business loss. But this is how these archetypes can happen. If I was aware of this, I would have known it. I would have known that I had a price. And since that time, I don't have a price anymore because I learned the lesson. The archetype saved me because I had replacements. So let's see what's going on here. It's a batter balance. We all have these facets to our characters. Exactly, Charles. That's the idea. I don't see a balancer. Let's go to her card and see the prostitute, the light attribute, accentuates the challenge of surviving without negotiating the power of your spirit. So there you go, the negotiator. I wasn't negotiating. Whatever this guy was telling me to do, I was doing it. I was threatening people. A Native American tribal leader, I picked up the phone and said, Mr. So-and-so did a lot for you, and now he's expecting something, and you better give it to him. You remember when you were hungry and he fed your family? That is so not me. That's a character that I play. Ramona Scott is in the house. Ramona, we haven't seen you in a while. Tanya and I were just talking about you Tanya was the board secretary, not a secretary. So she's just... she's talking about that there. So Facebook is telling Ramona to say hi. So now I'm going to go over my 8 as they exist now, because some have dropped off, some have been absorbed into my books. That's why it's not going to be a commercial for my novels. Don't go out and buy the novels tonight or anytime soon, because I don't want this to be a commercial for the novels. But it's only going to be a teaching tool about how we can expand out from beyond our 12, especially writers. So Jessica's in the audience, some other writers. The storyteller. This is my dominant prevalent archetype, and you all know that. There's no surprise there. Every day is a story all its own. This is my dominant archetype right now. Certainly the seeker. It's why I do this show. It's why I have on the great guests that we have on from a wide variety of topics, because I'm seeking knowledge all the time. And next year, when Parallels and Patterns, my lifelong quest for answers, the seeker, that's that dominant archetype for that. But also the seeker, though, goes hand in glove for me with the scribe. So you can link these up. Carolyn Myss defines that as the thirst for wisdom and truth wherever they are. That's the seeker, the scribe, preserving knowledge and information. Trying to do that. Trying to get a record of knowledge that's been buried, suppressed by the gatekeepers and all of that. The teacher. Also probably not surprising. This is one of my long-time archetypes, although I'm getting away from it a little. The mentor. I love the reciprocal energy of mentoring, helping someone on their path and journey, because I've had from Rosemary Ellen Guiley to my Aunt Annette, a guy I don't talk about a lot, but Dr. Richard Wertheim, my college writing professor. I don't always name him, but sometimes I'll talk about him in passing. So the mentor. The networker, which is so weird. You're not going to believe it, but actually when I'm not teaching, when I'm not doing these, I am shy as can be and very, very nervous, but I believe in networking. The idea of the shamanic spider building the web that connects things. It's with parallels and patterns. The networker is very, very big for me. So I like to link people up. It's a great compliment. There's been a trend now on the show where we not only have guests coming back, but they say, I have to introduce you to so-and-so and have them on the show. That's a form of networking. Sandy Hart, who was on a couple weeks ago. Sandy is a networker. That's the way we get things done. So this is a big one here. Tanya says the storyteller just told the story about your prostitute. Yes, I did, and I hope it was entertaining for you all because it was a lesson hard learned. $17,500, where we were raising 3 little kids and living in a tiny apartment, but that was the key. We were not where we wanted to be. In storytelling terms, there's a gap. Where you are, where you want to be, that drives the motivation. That drives the want. The Alchemist. I don't like to swear on this show, but I see myself as an alchemist. And one of my mentors, a man named Robert, I called him one day because things were really going down the tubes, and I managed to turn it around. That's a little bit of the saboteur. When the saboteur is turning things south for you, the alchemist can come in and turn that right around. And Robert, my mentor, kind of laughed when I was telling him the story, when I told him what happened. And he said, you know, Joey, God love you. He said, you're an alchemist. You can take shit and turn it into gold. That's the alchemist. You know, it's spiritual. Are we, you know, but you think of the Philosopher's Stone, the eternal youth, all of that kind of stuff. Really, that gets you to the pure eternus. So when you look at all this stuff metaphorically, it all links up. I'm kind of doing it here in real time, which I hope you find exciting. Jessica says, Sandy rocks. We've exchanged some emails and I'm diving into her book now. That's good. Networking. Because of this show, Jessica and Sandy met at the right time. Their archetypes are vibing. They're matching up, and that is super, super cool. And I love that. He said gold, Ronald says. I also said the other word. Oh, sorry. He's typing so fast there. He did say gold. And that's what it is. That life gold, that vibration high, keeping your candle lit. Now, this has become increasingly important to me the more I understand myself and my psyche and everything from the Briggs-Myers test, INTJ that I am, the hermit for those listening on or listening to the audio only. The hermit has become very, very important to me. This idea of a highly sensitive person who can only be out so much before it becomes just so overwhelming to my nervous system that I have to hide away. The fall and winter's coming up, which means I don't tour, I don't travel, I don't teach outside of the house, I don't perform, I write and I research, I smoke my pipes, I make fires, I sit outside, I watch nature a lot. I've been doing that. It's a different relationship with nature than the summer with the garden and with the garlic and the patapan squash and the different things that I grow. It becomes really essential to me, this idea of the hermit, to go back and forth. And it's really the hero's journey. This idea of separation, initiation, return. The return needs a rest. It needs to breathe. You need time to absorb. If you're just running that wheel constantly, are you reflecting on it? Talking about Sandy, talking about the liminal zone, the liminal odyssey, the gap between the stages of the hero's journey. So the hermit has become super, super important to me. And you'll see that communication as we go through the fall and winter on the show. This will be my little bit every week, this and Saturday morning story time, of reaching out to people. Otherwise, lots of books to write, lots of story. Tanya says the hermit emerged for many during the pandemic. It did. And a lot of people, and this was part of the mass resignation. It's a great point. I'm going to leave that up there. People said, hey, I love working from home. Hey, I love kind of doing my own thing. Cricut sold off the CRICUT, that great thing. Tanya makes so many amazing things with her Cricut. I want to craft. I want to use eBay. I want to go out there and do stuff. We had friends who made candles, and she's so good about it. Emily's going to be on the show in 3 or 4 weeks talking about this amazing trip she took out west. She's going to do a PowerPoint travelogue for us, the Alien, the ET Highway, and all that. So Jessica says, so what I'm hearing now, it's a good time to get with you about some writing mentoring. Absolutely, Jessica. Look me up, please. Now, this is a sidelight, and Jessica has been a client of mine in the past, but it makes me think, if I have a mechanism for this, which I think is kind of cool. I've revived my Patreon page for Every Day is a Story on its own, the YouTube channel. For as little as $1 a day, you can get some extra cool stuff. You can get outlines from the show, but for $2 or $5 or $10 a month, not $1 a day. I'm thinking about fundraising commercials for various things. For as little as $1 a day, you can. No, for $1 a month, $12 a year. There's that 12. $1 for every archetype, or $2, $5, $10. I will read your writing and give you feedback, or give you acting coaching, or talk to you one-on-one about some of our experiences in the field of the paranormal. So it's the YouTube channel, Joey Medea, Every Day is a Story on its own. But Jessica, yes, definitely hit me up, because fall, winter, I'm going to be doing some of that stuff. So my last archetype that I want to show you is the father. Oh, wait, Joey, your kids are 37 and 27, 36, 27, and 23. So why the father just in the past 4 or 5 years? Because I was out trying to make stuff happen, sometimes prostituting, sometimes saboteuring, doing the networking, doing the teaching, plus running a very successful, fairly big copy editing business where I had other people working for me, and was working on 36 academic journals at once, thousands upon tens of thousands of pages. And I was not a bad father, but father right now is a central archetype to me. How close I am with my 3 children, our daily communication, our proximity. 2 out of the 3 live very close to us, and that is a treat. One of the most popular things I put on Facebook in the past probably year was a picture of myself and my 2 sons out playing mini golf. People absolutely loved it. So this father archetype has become very, very strong for me. It's in line with the mentor, but now it's separate from it. The theater company kids used to say, you're like a second father to me. I still have some very successful young people who come to me and say, you're like a father to me. You weren't there. My parents died, or my parents got divorced, or whatever reason. But this archetype right now is so strong for me and means so much to me. There's Tanya, there's my children, there's my very, very close friends, who are very few, and I think that's maybe how it should be. And then there's the colleagues, and then there's the audience, and then there's the larger world. So this is a really, really, really important one. List the link to your YouTube channel, Joey Medea. I will do that, Ramona. But if you just go to YouTube and you search Joey, Joey, space Madia, Joey Medea, or Every Day is a Story all its own, you'll find it. Some of you are on it right now watching the show, because I broadcast the show from there. Okay, just really, really quickly, because I wanted to keep this to an hour, and I don't want this to be a commercial for my novel, so do not go out and buy them, and no, that is not reverse psychology. Not a commercial. But Jester Knight, the first book I wrote, and I am working on the sequel, The Lost Stone of Ruine, another of my winter projects. Boy, look at this stack of archetypes. There's the clown, who's the jester, and there's the knight, of course. So that jester knight, quite frankly, this was my working through my shadow. The idea of the more aggressive, the warrior, right? So I have the warrior here, the warrior, the knight, that more aggressive, natural Sicilian, the maleness, having the same name as my father, being very competitive, wanting to go out and do it, but balance it with the wisdom, with the physical, with the artistic, with the creative. And I came up with the Jester Knight. And people have been waiting 13 years for the sequel. It needed to ferment. It needed to be, as I changed, as I got more of a grip on this Jester Knight, that happened. Of course, there's a king in it. The horse is named Poet. I write poems, and I've done this going back, oh my goodness, I think I was 19 years old when I wrote the first poems 35 years ago that became this book. So instead of doing just outlining, I write everything out as poems, and then I convert it. What are some of the archetypes? The damsel. But the shadow is the, oh, I'm helpless, please come rescue me. That's the shadow. The light aspect of the damsel is, understanding the nature of healthy romance inspires you to rely on yourself. The women that the heroes in my books, they're all Tanya. They're all the damsel in a very, very light, positive way, healthy romance. So there's that. As a matter of fact, the fourth canon in the Quill book is coming out next month, and it's dedicated to her. And maybe I'll read you that dedication after the show comes out, if there's an appropriate time to do that. And then, of course, there's the queen. There's a very strong queen. There's a very strong princess. The female characters in my books are not whiny, fearful, weepy, helpless, where the men have to ride in and rescue them. And again, that's because Tanya didn't need me in her life. She didn't need me to rescue her from anything. She was a single mom working her ass off, raising two young boys on her own. The father archetype was absent completely. And she welcomed me in, not because she needed me, because she wanted me to be part of the journey. So that's Jester Knight. This book, and now we're getting into all of these books together constitute what I call the Stanton Chronicles, which is growing all the time. But Minor Confessions has a fallen angel who's also a vampire. He's definitely a trickster. He's a vampire. The book has a very central character who's a priest. That's my working through of my Roman Catholicism and the dark shadow side of religion. Anybody who knows the history of the Roman Catholic Church knows that there are some very dark aspects in the priestly class historically, some very horrific. There's a nun. There are monks really all throughout the Stanton Chronicles. Again, my working through religion, spirituality, religion as a power brokering, sort of gatekeepering. The mystic is a very big part of it all. Angels, of course, he's the angel falling upward planner, fourth ray. I think I've shown you planner before. He's otherwise a very, very beautiful angel, but when he gets angry, he turns into a gargoyle Baphomet kind of thing, and this is a representation of planner. I actually saw him one day leaving the holler after I got my publishing deal. It was a very kind of interesting, sort of very Alan Moore, Stephen King sort of thing when you meet one of your characters out in the world. The femme fatale is a very, very big part of it. Exorcisms are a big part of it. Mother and goddess are big. Those are my working through of the feminine, the role of the feminine, the divine feminine. So really this femme fatale and the mother and the goddess are all very prevalent in that book. So there you go. Then the canon and the quill. So 3 books. Really, the dominant archetypes are pretty simple. The hero and the heroine. So there are female pirates and there are very strong female characters. Angus's girlfriend, my dominant pirate archetype, hero archetype, is Ailish, and that's very much Tanya. That's why I dedicated the book to her. And of course, the rebel. That's the whole thing of the rebel. That's my whole Socrates thing that comes in with the teacher, the mentor, the show. Thank you for making it very, very successful. All the many people who watched the Dangers of Disclosure. I'm really glad a lot of people saw that and got that news. So those are the big ones. The rebel, of course, is the pirate. That's the big archetype, and the hero heroine paired. Not getting drunk on rum and shooting holes in boats. That came much later with a dude named Edward Lowe, who I was reading about recently. 3 Gothic Doctors and Their Sons, which I've talked about, started as a musical, became a novel, is being produced in California, will be filmed. There's all kinds of cool stuff. The pandemic really screwed it up. And now the producer has a major motion picture that he's working on that I can't talk about right now, but this has been put on the back burner. But these are the archetypes of the engineer, the visionary, the pioneer, the addict. So one of the 3 Gothic Doctors is Dr. Jekyll. It's a massive metaphor for addiction. Jekyll and Hyde. Tanya and I were watching something the other night. It's all over the place in horror. It's a major prevalent archetype, this idea of Jekyll and Hyde, the addict. So of course the destroyer and the nature of God and what happens when man usurps God. I lecture at times. I've done it for some universities. I also did a program on it for Into the Outer Realms on eugenics. That's that whole idea of becoming God, of mucking with the natural order of things, trying to eradicate things, trying to engineer things out of, and people out of existence, and types of people. This really, Three Gothic Doctors, is all about the shadow, all about the shadow of the visionary, the pioneer, God, usurpation of God, and the engineer, the corruption of science, the gatekeeper, and taking, natural order out. And then, of course, there's Sherlock Holmes and the Mystery of M. This one, of course, the detective, and I'm about to start a book that I'm excited about by Peter Costello. I picked up when Tanya and I were away for our weekend in Worcester at the bed and breakfast in a little bookshop. Yes, used bookshops still do exist. I judge a town by whether or not it has a used bookstore, and Worcester, Ohio absolutely does. It's the true crime investigations of Arthur Conan Doyle, including Jack the Ripper. So that's the third book in this series with Three Gothic Doctors and their sons. But there's also the Shapeshifter. I have a werewolf sort of character. It's a little different than a werewolf. Goes back into Native American mythology. You know that I've done a couple episodes on werewolves. I'm fascinated by the idea of the werewolf. And it is, again, a different kind of archetype, a very bestial kind of archetype. So did I keep it to an hour? I kept it to an hour. So thank you all. I really appreciate you being here tonight. Great conversation, great discussion. Next week, join us, Michael and CL, because it's a follow-on. It's sort of a part 2. So tell your friends about this one and come and check that one out. But we're going to talk about the shadow. And I have a feeling that all three of us are going to have different perspectives on it, which is the whole point. So anyway, be well. Tanya and I are going to watch Beetlejuice tonight. If you follow me on Facebook and Instagram, we're watching all kinds of movies, and I post pictures of them, talk a little about them every night. CL says, looking forward. I am too. Ramona says, too short. We typically go almost 90 minutes, but tonight just wanted to go the hour. Thank you all. I'm 1 minute behind. I apologize for that. Well, I always start at 1 minute after, so it's exactly an hour. Anyway, take care. I will see you in the Outer Realms. I really appreciate all of you. And until next week, peace. Have a terrific weekend. Oh, our friends. I am happy to say that we had half a dozen friends. Craig Ansell, who's so central to the show. Other people who were in the path of Hurricane Ian, and they all came out okay. Tanya was supposed to be in Clearwater, which got hit pretty good. It was at the eye of the storm, but they let her work from home in her new job. She didn't have to go do that. So some guardian angel archetypes working overtime. So peace, everyone. Take care. Very great.